Hey, everybody, welcome to Sec Days Virtual 2025. Welcome to our roundtable. This is around agents, LLMs, and the future of identity for AI. I'm Dwayne McDaniel. I'm developer advocate here at GitGuardian, and I'll be your host. We have an awesome panel, and I'll ask them to introduce themselves.
Thank you. Oded, Evan, CEO and co-founder for Achilles. Started my way with cybersecurity and identity management in the Israeli Defense Forces. I'm a reserve captain. Again, cybersecurity and identity was most of my career. Later on with CA Technologies. Started with human, but later on went to machine identities, as you can imagine, non-human workloads, whatever you'd like to call it. And Achilles today is the platform of choice for managing secrets, machine identity, and AI agents within all-around identity.
Yes, so hey everyone, great to be here. My name is Ophir. I'm the CTO and co-founder here in Apollo. And my background is more in infrastructure, security, infrastructure, DevOps, cloud, all this involving. I worked many years in the Israeli Air Force. And in the last 5 years, I'm exploring the transition of IAM, where the cloud space is evolving. And I believe that today we will talk about AI and how it's reflect on AI. So Apollo, our mission is to empower organization on aligning security and operation in access management. We work with many customers from different industries, helping them on the challenges of security, streamline the security and access, overprivilege, and many other things.
Hi, everyone. Great to meet you. I'm the only non-CEO on the room today. I'm a product manager at GitGuardian. I'm in charge of the detection and remediation squads, and more particularly, trying to involve more and more AI and machine learning with our tremendous team into our process, into our product, for the greater good of our customers.
Hi, nice to meet you all. I'm Stan. I'm the co-founder of Dust. Dust is a platform that lets companies build and operate agents. I think what makes us unique is really the ability for everyone who's within the teams of a company to be able to explore and experiment with agents and build them for their local teams and see how they evolve. I was at OpenAI before that for 3 years doing research on the mathematical reasoning capabilities of models. And I have a weird interest for applying LLMs to security subjects, in particular vulnerability discoverability, which I've been digging into on the side for many years.
Excellent. So let's just do a ground set for people that might be joining this conversation. Everybody has their own definition of what an AI agent is and how they're using that. And is it just hype? But I would love to hear from each of you, like, how are you actually deploying AI agents, and what do you even mean by an AI agent and within your organization?
Yeah, I think we so there's a very large spectrum of definitions for AI agents, going from very workflow oriented artifacts to agents that are really mostly defined by instructions and actions. To me, the definition of an AI agent is pretty general definition is basically a program where some decision within the program, some branching within the program is actually driven by an LLM. I think that would be the most general definition I would use.
The way I see it is maybe I am biased because I'm using IDEs where I'm coding every day with Claude, for example. And the way I see an agent is basically because I'm jumping between Cursor, Windsurf, because I want to test everything and to have an understanding of everything. And the way I see it, the way I see an agent today is basically a super prompt, a system prompt that is built in the IDE, and just try to make the most of my prompt as a user to the LLM. And for me today, an agent is something that is being designed for enhancing my prompt and have the better value out of it. But this is in a developer environment. I'm not looking for all environment.
Yeah, sure. So AI agent in my language would be an autonomous software that has intention, has a goal, and has the ability to actually achieve that particular goal, either using by LLM for that sense or any natural language processing.
So I think it's a great question, and I think there is a huge unknown in the agent space, and if we take it to agencies and what we see going in the future, and I think the reason of that it's the potential that we see on agents and what they can achieve in, I think, in all the topics that exist today, right? It's really something all of us, and I believe everyone that listens to us is exploring right now. And as I see agent, it's actually remind me OOP from programming, and object-oriented programming. So it's the idea of taking an LLM and create an abstraction layer for humans to solve more complex tasks, more complex things, right? So we all know like the basic of agents, like we provide a goal, data, and tools to agent to do something, but in the end, we do that kind of abstraction to make it simple for us, the humans, to work with an LLM that can do a lot of things. So I think it's very cool, and we see a lot of usage example also internally in Apono and also in our product. We use that kind of philosophy of agent to provide access assistant to get access to things, coding, streamline processes, and I believe that we will all can talk a lot about that. But there is so many options that we will see also in the future.
Yeah, I like the OOP relation here. It's like MCP server being private or public function in your class, and it made total sense. Never thought about that, but total sense. Yeah, definitely. And I hope we will talk about MCP servers later on, because that's my passion.
That's actually a pretty good segue to the next thing I want to talk about, because we're moving away from an isolated agent. We've seen the evolution from RAG, retrieval augmented generation, and now we're moving to this world of MCP. And this all points to autonomous systems, autonomous actors. How do we secure this, like, as we're building out this automation infrastructure?
It's true that there's no question that as the technology evolves, the kind of tasks that those agents will be able to take will evolve as well, and will be higher and higher level. And it's pretty clear that eventually you imagine agents that are operating in the context of a team as almost autonomously, in the sense that they are more ambient agents than agents that you necessarily have a conversational interface with. They do some work in the background. They ping you when you have questions. And so the very important question here is how do we obviously monitor what they're doing, but also how do we permission the capability of those agents, especially because today the answer in the market has been mostly let's follow the rights of the user that calls the agents. But as we're moving towards agents that are more and more useful, you're going to have more and more of them that are not necessarily triggered by user, they're triggered by external conditions. And as that happens, we will need to permission those agents. And so there's a whole questions around permissioning for agents that is obviously extremely interesting, because if it's not triggered by a user, then what are the rights of the agents, and who defines them, and how do we define them when we build the systems?
The industry today is very much focused on the models themselves, about hallucination of AI agents, their own decision making that would be not moral or to break some kind of privacy rules. I've seen that again and again. Also had some discussions about that with Gartner's senior analyst, about the fact that they're not yet mentioning IAM as one of the major top challenges within AI agents security. And I believe that they were about to change it. They just now, 2 days ago, they've released in IAM for AI, kind of a new report in that realm. And yet the industry around AI security is still not very much focused on identity, unfortunately. And definitely we hope to see more and more awareness around this fact, because this will be eventually the tsunami of all permissions entitlements whenever they are. And just to comment on that part particularly, I've heard different voices in the industry that says, let's give the AI agents the exact permissions or the exact identity that the actual users would have. Obviously, I'm talking from a position, but it's not just about that position. Rather than think what would happen, Dwayne, if you'll give the AI agents your own credentials, that would completely ruin the whole point of accountability. Because tomorrow morning, when a CISO or a risk officer would come and say, Dwayne have done this and that, Dwayne, you would be able to say, I haven't done anything. This is a machine that they've done it. So for sure, Delegation is very problematic for AI agents and should be examined carefully. There are all kinds of solutions in that area within OAuth and some areas in the OAuth protocols that have not been practically provided today. So there is a challenge there of how to secure the identity. Obviously, our own philosophy and point of view of AI agents identity would be to create short-lived credentials, especially, by the way, within the MCP servers themselves. This is where the challenge would be, and how the MCP servers would actually interact with the data sources themselves. A lot of questions around how would AI agents that sits outside the organization would authenticate to the organization themselves, having that there is no joint IAM. A lot of challenges in that realm, and some of them we'll speak today.
When we speak about agents, we need to understand that they get decision based on the input they have, right? And each tool that we add to the agent add more input, right? And we cannot control this kind of input. And a lot of the time when we talk with an agent or we have a kind of interaction, we forget that the tool themselves, for the LLM, for the agent brain, right? It's the same as user input. And as we know, he get decision based on that. So now let's think about agent. We provide him the permission to kill all of our server if he wants, right? Or we provide him an admin to the database, right? And we think we told the agent he's only going to read data from the database. But as we know, when we play with the LLMs today, sometimes they get abused a little bit or hallucinate, and maybe the agent will decide because of an attacker that tried to trick him, or just because of hallucination, he's going to say, I'm going to delete all the tables in the database, right? So now the agent have permission to do that. Different than application, the agent can decide to do stuff like humans that we cannot expect, right? It's unpredictable, more like humans. And I think this is where we see in Apollo and we see in the industry this kind of shift when we need to look on agent and we need to take from both worlds. We need to take some best practices from how we manage access to humans, how we build this kind of access permissions, least privilege, how we provide this kind of processes that provide access in the environment, and combine that with how we manage access to machines, short-lived tokens, as Oded speak, and different protocols that allow us to manage access in a secure way. And we need to combine those two together if we want to build kind of like security or a new IAM approach for agent. And I think it's very important because this is going to be the only way we can build the agents in a way that we have our ability to trust them in the environment, right? We talked about accountability. We have the ability to trust them and know that they're going to help us and not break our environment.
It's really interesting because I think that with agent enhanced with MCP servers, we are not in the world of a basic script doing some task and I assign permission to do that task only. With agent, we are mostly interacting with something that is thinking. So I cannot give all the permissions, or no, I cannot also give just the permission needs. Maybe because the agent will make some decision. And for example, I was supervising the MCP server we just released, and we realized that it had my permission on our workspace, and it went kind of beyond the task I gave him. He wanted to make something much more efficient, but not the task I gave him. It was correct in a way, but it was going to change every incident and every stuff. So it's really hard and to reimagine, I think, permission in this new world of agent working for us and us being their managers and being controlling their outcome and training them. Because in the end, I think this will not be a permission issue, but a training issue. Did I train you well? Did I validate every of your outcome well? Are you trained and onboarding in our context well? Because you will need permissions to do stuff, and I will have to provide them to you, just as I am providing permission to a new onboarded intern in our company, for example.
That's a really interesting perspective on that, because this idea of onboarding an agent, this idea of onboarding a system and having it earn trust. I know as a human, you start at an organization, they don't give you full permission to the production database on day one. Is that what our future is going to look like here for AI?
Why not?
Why not?
Why not? Think of tomorrow morning a function within an organization that is acting as an intern, right? They want that they're getting. They need to learn. Obviously, they can learn fast, but in order to really visualize it and to make it more easy for us to think about it, think of an AI agent that really acts as an employee. Okay. Today, everything is virtualized, and we know that AI can actually create video. So think of an employee that you can see and speak with, right? I don't know if you got this opportunity, guys, to speak with ChatGPT and others. I'm doing it sometimes even with my kids just to get to be more familiarized. Most times it's very funny, but think that this voice can have very easily can have a video, can have an inbox, can have a Zoom user, and we can communicate with that. And that particular AI agent can really have, and well, with time, some people would also have some kind of relationship and with that, but that's a different story. In terms of permissioning, right? In terms of entitlements, you can start by providing them access to onboarding materials. So it will take them 1 minute to consume all of that, but you would want to see them behave at least for several days or weeks, because there's also this psychological aspect of their team members, right? You want to see them behave if they're acting as whatever profession it is, right? If it's in terms of GTM, in terms of sales, in terms of technical support, or whatever it is, you would like to see that the good outcome is coming before you're providing them more permissions, right? And that can happen as a conversation as well. It doesn't have to necessarily be something that is very complicated to plan, right? So at the beginning, you can think of it as exactly as we behave with humans, but to provide them with their own unique identity and not to just copy paste or to delegate an existing human permission. It doesn't matter, right? Doesn't matter how we call it. Eventually, the technical aspect is it's the same actor director user, right? It doesn't matter how we call it, right? It's the same lines within an SQL database, right? It's the same groups within an LDAP server. So eventually, technically, it's the same, right? So we can call it differently. We can have a naming convention. The number of those identities actually would get bigger and bigger with time, right? And we all know the ratios, and we all, you overusing that within the marketing materials of all of those companies. But basically, so this technicality looks the same. So it doesn't matter how we call it, rather than the way that we provide it. With AI agents, it will need to be provided automatically sometimes and with script-wise, and this requires the just-in-time approach.
I want to challenge a little bit. Like, we talk about agents as new intern, as humans in the environment, and I think we need to remember, and we talk about the idea of agents speak with us, have a video, have some. When he speak with me, he has different attitude than he speak with someone else, right?
Yeah.
And I think this is where the risk is come to place, right? Because we, as a human, always been the place when the attacker aim, and I don't think it's going to change with agent. It's just going to be more complicated to touch, right? So if we have an agent in the environment, it's great that he act like a human, but we need to remember, we talked about ownership and accountability. We cannot fire an agent, right? It's not going to, we can try maybe, but we probably going to, if it's harm our business, I don't think we can just fire the agent and say, oh, it's okay, we fired this guy, and we will do better interviews the next time we will do, right? We need to handle these kind of things. And this is exactly why I think agents are special here. They act half like humans, but they are applications. They are machines, and they need to be enforced as both. And I think it's a new approach, a new philosophy, or new frameworks we need to think about when we want to protect this kind of agent, because we cannot do like human, just give them access and expect them to behave the same tomorrow as today, or being like we want them to be, right? And we cannot expect them to be application and predictable, so we cannot bring them an admin to the environment. If it's an access token or service account, we cannot provide them an admin to environment. We need to think different. We need to think as in a least privilege mindset, right? And we always think about least privilege in the end, right? Like we have overprivileged environment, and we will go to least privilege. With agent, we need to go the opposite. We need to start with least privilege and walk with processes with the least privilege, because if we are doing overprivilege, we are creating a new risk to our organization.
This comes down to accountability. Like these agents are only ever acting on behalf of someone. And I think that's where the logic of, well, I'll just give it my permissions because it's acting on behalf of me. So what do we do around the traceability, the observability, and the auditability on this without stifling innovation along the way?
I mean, to echo with what Odette said, I think accountability goes both ways, and it's very tricky to let an agent write in your name. It's very tricky from an accountability perspective, because then you can say, hey, I did never wrote that. It's the machine wrote it for me. It's also tricky even on the human aspect of things. We've had some test agents within Dust that were operating on GitHub keys, as an example, from some engineers. And as people start using those agents, if you see an issue created by the engineer that had given that GitHub key at the very beginning, all of a sudden everybody looks, you have the reflex as a human to become suspicious of whatever that person is writing on Dust, on GitHub, because you know that maybe it's an agent that was behind. And so even from a human to human relationship, it's really important that an agent writing in a system must be identified as an agent, and that's something that is key. So I think it's really important to, whether these are service accounts or typical accounts, it's really important to make it clear that these are machines, and so that creates the whole necessity for creating that we've covered, for creating a new kind of IAM for them, for sure.
I think accountability is one of the biggest problems we see here, right? Like I think we also, if you saw in Google, the Gemini have like this warning, like validate the response, that right? Like in other words, don't trust what we respond to you. It's like, what? And there is already stories when companies are actually saying, oh, it's not me, it's the agent that did that and that and that to our customer, right? And I think it's a huge problem. I really don't know what's going to happen with the future of agents, internally and externally, right? Internally as well, because I can tell you in our company, we use agents in AI, we use Cursor, we use different co-piloting tools. So we use agent to write code, but the developer is always accountable to everything that happened in the environment, and it's become a challenging thing because everything is changing, and you have more and more capabilities that you use agent for. So how are you going to be accountable to that? From observability perspective, I don't think it's that different than application, because the agent is making decision is unpredictable, but observability platforms doesn't care how the decision is made. They care about telemetrics and what was the story, right? I need all the data to tell the story. So we will need more data to tell the story of what's going on with all our agents in our system, and it's probably going to be to cost more from the observability perspective. But I don't see it as an agent problem. Accountability, huge problem that we have today.
Yeah. By the way, Ophir, when you mention that, that the employee needs to still be accountable for what the AI agent is doing, if it's a programmer, to be accountable for the code, I believe we will not be able to keep that position for a long time. For now, it can work within several months, maybe a year. And I'm hearing that also, from conversations I'm having with lots of, with companies, with the AI creators companies, right, that are creating this. They are absorbing their own technology, and the percentages of code that are currently being created from those AI machines does not even allow, furthermore, the the observation on the or the oversight of a human being. It's not enough. We're not able to do that. And this is something that, in terms of security practitioners, right? How do we protect that, and kind of releasing the fact that the business would run faster from us, right? The business would run faster here. The adoption would run much faster than security. So I believe that we should release that part of observing them rather than playing with the consequence. So exactly as you said, right? To understand what is it that they are doing, what is it that they have done. And by the way, it's going to be a huge, huge challenge, specifically within the observability area, given that the load of that information is going to be much bigger than what we used to see with human beings that have been created a certain amount of audit data. AI agents would create much more. That's a huge challenge in terms of scale. But in terms of going back to the identity, machine identity management have been here basically to answer the scaling move on top of human, and to start working out and providing solutions for dynamic credentials and dynamic identities for machines. AI agents are just the second big wave, exponential wave on top of machine. But in terms of the technology, in many cases, very similar. If by today machine identities provided SDK for Java or for Go in order to interact between workloads, tomorrow morning it's the AI agent with the MCP server that requires SDK with a different language, right? I'm a bit oversimplifying it, but give or take, in many cases it is like that. So just sharing on my point of view.
But thinking ahead, we're going to move into a world, and we're already there, I think, in a lot of ways, where these agents are starting to negotiate among themselves, among platforms, like going out and negotiate with an AI on another system. The classic travel agent assist bot that I think comes up in a lot of conversations. Like, what happens when it meets another AI along the way, and it needs to negotiate those rights and privileges? I know we're in early days of it, but what are we seeing there? Like, how are we going to manage these secure, decentralized identities?
I will start. So I think we're already there. It's all so we see that kind when we talk about MCP, we spoke about, we have MCP and we have new standards, new framework, and I think that we still build the new frameworks, and we will see more. We will see more standards when we talk about agent and AI, and we have this MCP that provide us the ability to give action tools to one agent. But the cool thing is that tool can be another agent, right? And a tool of the another agent can be another agent. So you can think about, and the another agent can speak with the original agent and do a circle, right? Like we need to have that kind of thing. So we're going to get into a place with a lot of identity, and we see standards like Spiffy coming to help us with authentication, right? To this kind of a large amount of identity and all of that. And everything is moving, and the problem is that there is a large scale, it's a very large scale, and everything is changing very, very rapidly, right? And I think here it's what we need to look on that, and how we going to manage this kind of let's call it centralized decentralized approach, because we need to be in control on a very large environment, but we understand that the part of the environment is going to be autonomous and work with different identities, with different protocols, with different framework that's going to help to that. And we talk a little bit about observability. So I've been in the observability world as well, and I saw the shift of observability from an old way to monitor everything in the environment. And I think there is a similarity a little bit. And the reason is that if in the old world we wanted to go into a server to understand what these servers do, right? So we needed to go into a server, get the logs from this server, and to understand what's going on. Nowadays, when we have observability platforms that help us, all the telemetry go to a centralized place, and we manage all of our huge environment in a very large scale. So in that example is just to simplify how we need to look on identity and access management on agents, right? We need to see this kind of, like, I agree with Oded. It's on top of machine identity, it's going to a very large scale. So how can we get a centralized control on that very huge environment in that way? And I think this is the challenge that we will see new standards, new frameworks, and new solutions coming from.
But Mike, I have a question around that because I'm trying to understand. I understand what Oded said about this is a new scale of there will be a lot of more agent coming on and working. But when you are a company with 10,000 developers, for example, they decide stuff, they build stuff, they take decision, etc. How is it different to manage and control and observe 10,000 developers and 10,000 agents talking to each other and taking decision and stuff like that? Are we more afraid about 10,000 agents than 10,000 developers? Is it much more complex to manage 10,000 agents? That can, by the way, agent can get their keys and access to a central vault much more easily than 10,000 developers. So how is it different for you? I don't see that different. It's a huge complexity to manage 10,000 developers. So what would be more complex to manage 10,000 agents?
Well, I think in the case of developers versus coding agents, that's a great example. When you have 10,000 developers, you do have a system of delegation of trust across humans, where the manager at the top trusts the sub-managers, which trust the team lead, which trusts their engineers, and there is systems that are set up ad hoc for verifying and maintaining that trust. The problem, if we go fast forward, and we could make the bet that by the end of the year, maybe mid next year, most developers will stop writing code, and so it's going to happen slowly but surely. And at the beginning, we'll be reviewing the code of the AI agents, and eventually, when we start building trust with the machine, we'll stop reviewing it progressively, and we'll just trust the machine. And at the end, you've got a bunch of agents run by developers that are writing most of the code, and nobody knows what's in the code anymore. And there you're in kind of a big trouble. And so I think there is some unique challenge of like really having those trust relationship between the nodes of your organization. That's very hard to. What would it mean to elevate an agent as a manager? What would it mean to elevate an agent as a team leader so that you have more trust? At the end of the day, it's the same model, makes the same mistakes. That's still definitely a tricky subject. Plus, we haven't talked that much about it, but all those agents are still today subject to attacks that are pretty finicky. You can create prompt injections through data sources that are very hard to monitor, because to achieve a good task in programming task, you often will have to pull data through RAG from design docs that are maybe living on Notion, but maybe Notion also leaves some data that has been written by an external partner, and all of a sudden, maybe you have a prompt injection attack that lies in the middle of that. And it's going to be very tricky to monitor those new attacks, because they're not programs anymore. They're kind of informal text hidden in a haystack of data of your company. So that's a challenge as well.
I want to add to that, I think the 10 developers to 10 agents, it's also like human for humans, you can track them, right? Like the speed of an application, or in this example, agent, it's so fast that we talk about so many audits, so many actions, so many data, and maybe you need an agent to protect 10,000 agents, right? And or to control. But I think the problem is not just the scale of the number of agents. It's also the scale that come from data, actions, and movement. And it's going to be very, very fast. And I think we need the same kind of control that's moving the same pace like the agents themselves.
It's really interesting because we are here talking about identities and permission and secrets and stuff, but we talk a lot more about trust. Do we trust them in the end? And trust does not come from IAM access or the right permission. Basically, do we trust the code that is in the LLM itself to take the right decision and not to go sideways and just delete all my Notion pages because he thought it was poorly written? And it's really interesting because you said, Ophir, that was they are machines, they are not human. Definitely they are machines, but we are right in this on this edge between a machine that can take decision as a human and that can make mistakes as well. I surprised myself recently. I was working with Claude, and he went into an endless loop, and he was even talking to itself, saying, "I'm not doing a great job," and etc. And I was even thinking, you have the right to make mistakes. Like I was talking to an intern or somebody in my team. You have the right to make mistakes. You will learn. You will grow, and etc. etc. So it's really disturbing. It's not only a machine, and we have to trust them at some point and build from that, I think.
And I think it's a lot about the framework themselves. So there is the LLM itself. And I think from my perspective, we cannot trust the LLM to protect our data or to not doing mistakes. We cannot trust that because for now, we don't know how the output is actually generated. And again, there is a random here and etc. But we can trust the frameworks and the tools, like the framework that wrap the wrapper that wrap this LLM. And I think this is the key when we talk about, for example, identities. We don't let the LLM manage his identity or move the IDs or getting the data of everything, right? We get our framework to decide how to authenticate, how to get permissions, how to decide what data to share or not. So I think it's very important to build the right frameworks. I think we are in the way, but there is still so many frameworks that doesn't think about these kind of things. So we need to be careful with that.
Where do you see the low-hanging fruit right now? If there are teams out there that are just starting to experiment with AI, they're just starting to build these systems, they're building their first MCP server, where's the low-hanging fruit around identity, access, and governance right now without completely overwhelming yourself?
So there's obviously a challenge when you put an MCP up and you start propagating inside of your company. It's very hard to keep track of who uses what. Is anybody authorized to connect to your MCP server to interact with Cloud Code or even Cloud desktop? So I think my advice is to try to find products that provide you an interface between they are data or MCP servers, that is actions, and that will give you an ability to distribute those rights and monitors who's accessing what at a given time. I think that's really the first step. We're going to have a lot of complexities. Anybody kind of administering a company, as every verticalized product will start asking data from other products to be able to build context. We're entering a world of quadratic relationship of data management across platforms. And so there's really obviously a need for having those centralized platforms that try to, if only not control, at least keep track of how the data flows from one product to another, how the data flows from an agent platform to another, how the data or the action flows from an agent running on a machine versus where it's implemented. I think there's really thinking about buying a product around that is probably the biggest advice I would do. And there are many different types of products, and I think the market is still building up and creating the right abstraction. So it's a very early days of that market, but there's definitely a need to think about that earlier than later.
Yeah. Just to comment on that, in terms of the low-hanging fruit, I think that the point to catch, for everyone, just to run like an exit point on their head in terms of the program exit, right? When any professional, whether this is an AI agent, operator, implementer, or a security person, whenever they find themselves providing identity or credentials, ask yourself, are you providing something that is fixed, right? If you're writing code, that's your opportunity to make the change and to make sure that you are, first of all, not keeping the identity, the secret, within the code itself, inside. That's number one, within the MCP for sure. Number two, to make sure that you're doing that with a mechanism that would be able to provide you with a short-term token for any time that this particular transaction would happen. For any time that an MCP server goes to the database, that should be facilitated with a temporary credential, okay, a temporary identity. We would be able, obviously, to track that within the system that is providing you those credentials. So those are the low-hanging fruit, would be not to just go ahead and provide those just like we've done maybe in the past, rather than now using this opportunity today and now to start fixing the past mistakes, right? And because those would be the low-hanging fruit, is to actually also use the Gen AIs that open up the code right now to make the changes and to direct it, not to keep the credentials within the code. So those are the low-hanging fruit that we can practically enjoy from day one that we are working with those AI agents.
Yeah, from my perspective, I think like we see agents as a new risk. So I think education is probably the first thing you can do in the organization. Start thinking and ask the question. Do a brainstorm with people about why our agents are risky, how they different. Choose the right framework to manage the agent in the right way. Agents, they are another application, so use the same practices you already have. Before you choose new methodology about using agent, use the same practices you already have for machines. Just make sure you streak them and provide this privilege from day zero. I think it's very important when we talk about agents. And I believe we are in a place where, and if you think about agent, think about it as I can enable my organization to use agent, or I can find myself doing a shadow agents discovery, right? To find out where is the agents that make it dangerous in my environment. So now it's the time to choose what side you take on the agent journeys.
I think Ophir said also later that the framework is protecting the company from the usage of the bad usage of the LLM, etc. And I think that companies need to empower their champions within the company to use the right tool with the right permissions first. So educate everyone and build from there. So you give the tools, you give the education, you give the permissions, and the right people, the right champions will do the right thing using the agents in the right way, giving the right permission, etc., etc. And then you start from there. But in the end, you need a human in the loop. You must not jump straight to an agent will do everything, or many agents will do everything. This is a risk. You go really slowly, empower your champion, and keep a human in the loop, at least at the beginning, and we will see what lies ahead in a few months.
This has been a great discussion. Thanks everybody for being here. I do want to give everybody a chance to say one final word. Need to keep it short for sake of time.
It's all about embracing agents. It's going to be there's going to be two ways for agents to conquer the world. It's through incumbents adopting them, or AI native startups competing with them. So my advice is, even for security practitioners, is to embrace the technology.
Kind of the same thing. I want to talk to people that are in the same place I was a year or 2 years ago, thinking this is just a hype and it will fade away. I was definitely wrong. It's not a hype. It's providing value, yeah, do not think this as a hype. Embrace it wisely, and it will provide a lot of value.
So it doesn't matter where you are in the journey. If you just starting to understand the different terms, or you already build your own agentic process, don't panic. It's a new technology. And I think we need to take that and understand, like every other technology we add, it's going to build slowly, and we're going to add the methodologies, the frameworks, and the tools and the best practices, of course, and going to help us to manage that. So educate yourself about what's coming, and I think we're going to a very cool future with that technology.
Harness what is it that is coming, and to actually make a better decisions around the security posture with around identity, leverage OAuth and many other temporary identities / credentials and tokens in order to secure those identities. Do not use the user as the identity, the human user as the credentials, their credentials, in order to actually be provided to the AI agents. That would be a wrong practice. Rather than use that and observe them as a new animal that need to be provided with new identities. And this is basically the way to actually secure them.
Thank you much. Thank you so much, everyone. This has been an awesome conversation. Hopefully everyone out there listening gets a lot of value and knows how to carry that conversation on in their own organization now and raise that awareness and get those conversations moving. So thanks again for everybody, and enjoy the rest of Sec Day virtual.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you.